Good evening. My name is Miguel Ramos Merced, and today I will be presenting the experiment that was testing kangaroo care on preterm infant breastfeeding. So to get us started, this research was very influenced by the different experiments and work by Harlow, who was trying to help with demonstrating the powerful effects that love and the absence of love could have on an individual. And throughout the experiments, Harlow assisted with revealing how important it was for a caregiver to have or give love for a healthy childhood development. So the research purpose was simply to test the effects of kangaroo care, known as KC, which was skin-to-skin contact by the mother to the infant, on breastfeeding outcomes in preterm infants, which was being compared within two control groups. Then they were exploring whether maternal infant characteristics as well as the mother's choice to use KC were correlating with each other to breastfeeding measures. And as well, since it was very unethical to prevent mothers from engaging in any kind of intervention or interaction with their infants, they were very encouraged to focus on doing and the activities that were given to them throughout their treatment groups. So the methods that were taken, first of all, the participants were racially diverse mothers, and their preterm infants were born weighing no less than 1750 grams, which is relatively about 3.8 pounds. And another thing to keep in consideration is this is an experimental study. So the mother and their infants were enrolled once the infants were deemed healthy and at least weighed 1,000 grams, which is relatively 2.8 pounds, as well as they could be safely held outside of the incubators by their parents. And then the treatment groups were based off KC, kangaroo care, auditory, tactile, visual, vestibular, known as ATVV, and intervention. And then the participants were then instructed by study nurses who took their time to be part of the experiment to allocate some of the mothers to the KC, ATVV, or intervention or informational groups, and then were asked to engage in these interactions with their infants for about a minimum of 3 times a week in the hospital as well as at home, all up till their infants reach the age of 2 months so they can be adjusted for prematurity. Continuing with the methods, the procedures that were taken, one, the participants were informed very well that the study involved mothers conducting safe and potentially very beneficial interventions for their infants. And then after that, they were given a baseline questionnaire. Next, participants were then assigned to one of those 3 groups that I mentioned earlier and were asked to practice either one of them. Then, to promote fidelity, participants were videotaped weekly by the study nurses to assess one of those study groups' actions, and as well as to ensure that the study nurses were effectively supporting the mothers. And then lastly, participants were then asked to participate in or complete an infant bedside checklist about the activities that they were doing during each visit, which was done to minimize drawing the mother's attention to the study's activities. And certain those activities consisted of rocking the infant to sleep or even singing a lullaby. The results from this experiment, mothers from each of the 3 groups were seen to be equally likely to have provided their milk, or in this case have breastfed their infants during hospitalization. And the statistics showed that 74.3% of mothers in the KC group did that. 79.5% of the mothers in the ATVV groups did it, and 68.4% of the mothers in the informational or intervention groups did it. But one thing to keep in consideration was mothers who practice KC, regardless of even being randomly allocated into the group, were more likely to provide their milk or breastfeed than those who did not practice KC. And to conclude this whole PowerPoint, overall, the findings suggested that those assigned to the kangaroo care group actually did not influence an increase in breastfeeding during hospitalization. And then the findings as well do support that the use of randomized controlled trials to assess the effectiveness of KC with preterm events showed a pretty high amount of effectiveness. Clearly, more efforts are needed to promote this mother and infant interactions in order to facilitate breastfeeding, which indicates that it will have to surpass simple skin-to-skin contact. And thank you for listening today, and this is my presentation, and it's concluded.